Good evening, everyone. Welcome this evening. Thank you for coming out on this very, very busy evening of the season holidays. Tonight is our second town hall meeting, and our subject will be the South Avenue redevelopment Phase 2. We'll hear about both options that are being discussed by Mr. Russo and my committee. I'd like to thank Mr. Russo, Mr. Minks, and his staff for being here this evening. Thank you very much. I'd like to also thank the members of my newly appointed joint committee of the council and the planning board, Council President Tedesco, Councilwoman Blumenstock, and Councilman Sarno. And from the planning board, Chairman Steve Breed, Vice Chairman Catavaggio, and member Craig McCarrick. To my left, we have our borough attorney, Mr. Renaud, and Mr. Northgrave, our redevelopment attorney. As the council meeting, we have a hearing of the citizens. We'd like to keep tonight's comments to the same parameter of 3 minutes. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Council President Sarah Tedesco. Oh, thank you. I just didn't introduce everybody. Mr. Russo, Mr. Mix, would you like to make the presentation at this time?
Oh, okay. Absolutely. Again, I suspect you can hear me. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for having us. Members of the Joint Committee, truly appreciate the opportunity to come here again. I see a lot of familiar faces from the town hall that we had a month or so ago regarding Phase 1, or what we call South Ave 1, which is the north side of South Avenue, the development that predominantly is contemplated to replace the industrial buildings along the north side on the old Casali and Petrozello property. The purpose of tonight's meeting and town hall is really at the suggestion of the Joint Planning Council and Planning Board Committee for us to really gauge the public's interest and sentiments with regard to the contemplated second phase of development. And this is something that would follow the first phase development probably in and around 2020 or so in terms of opening thereabouts, but conceptually on the parking lots that are across the street on the south side of South Avenue, adjacent to the fire department. And that area would include both that parking area that you're all familiar with, it just remains there. It's had a lot of debris and boats and cars and a lot of things on it, as well as the former Taglia house, the single-family home that's still there, and the former Wells Fargo drive-up bank branch. That area comprises the balance of what's known as the South Avenue transit-oriented redevelopment area. This is a redevelopment area that was designated in need of redevelopment. It was recognized that that property was underutilized or improperly utilized and really should be redeveloped for a greater purpose to the benefit of the municipality. And that designation came, not coincidentally, together with the municipality's filing of what's called the DJ action, declaratory judgment action, in order to try and accomplish multiple goals, the main goal of which was to achieve compliance with affordable housing obligations that are a constitutional obligation of each municipality in the state. I'm not going to bore you with the specifics of that, and it wouldn't be appropriate anyway, because Mr. Renaud is here, and if you have any questions about that action, I'm sure he'd be thrilled to discuss it with you in detail. The long and the short of that, though, is that we're here as the designated redeveloper of the transit-oriented, South Avenue transit-oriented redevelopment area. We have successfully worked collaboratively with both the Borough Council and the Planning Board and its professionals toward developing a redevelopment plan for the north side, the Phase 1, or what we call South Ave 1, as many of you heard at the last town hall. The purpose of tonight is to now talk about the development scheme and strategy for South Ave 2, which is the south side. I have with me Edward Russo, principal of Russo Development, and principal of the entity that owns all of that property, the remaining south side of the property. It's an entity the owning entity is South Ave 2 LLC. That is a Russo entity, a Russo affiliated entity. That entity would seek designation from the mayor and council as the redeveloper of that South Ave, south side of the development. Phase 2 development. At that time, we would seek to enter into a redevelopment agreement, much like we did for the north side, with the municipality. And thereafter, based on that redevelopment plan and redevelopment agreement, we would then file with the planning board and go through the planning process, seeking approvals for a future development on that site. During the course of the declaratory judgment action for affordable housing that the town was involved in, Russo Development and its affiliated entities became interveners. We joined in that action and worked very collaboratively with Mr. Renaud and his team and the borough professionals toward brokering a settlement with affordable housing and a public interest group known as Fair Share Housing Coalition. Fair Share Housing is suing many municipalities throughout the state to compel them to bring affordable housing into their communities. Our sites, and we're proud to say that we really did stand with Garwood, and I think we brokered a very good, manageable, reasonable settlement, both for the developer and certainly for the municipality, by limiting the number of affordable units that are deemed to be required by Fair Share Housing and the courts, and also by establishing a mechanism by how we're going to achieve those apartment units to satisfy the town's constitutional obligation. And both the north and south side developments are expressly identified in a settlement agreement that was achieved by all the parties to that action. And that settlement agreement has allowed the town to avoid the prospect of protracted and further cost in litigation. And it's also enabled the town to really maintain some control over the destiny of exactly what is going to be in town and where is it going to be located and how is it going to be crafted so that you maintain the character of your town and are not at the mercy of a court-imposed settlement or a court-imposed order sticking a number, you have to achieve these units and this is how you have to do it. This was an opportunity for Garwood really to maintain some control over that development. And we're a partner to that and are proud of that settlement. As part of the settlement, it was contemplated that 8 affordable units would be generated by whatever development, at least 8 or 15% of the units that are developed on South Ave 2 would be affordable units. At least 30 or 10% of South Ave 1 are already in the can, in the agreements, will have to be affordable units. But South Ave 2, we know that we have to at least develop, as a developer, 8 units that will be affordable in order to comply with the settlement agreement and the Fair Share plan, or the housing plan that Garwood has adopted. That was contemplated as part of a 52-unit stacked townhome development on South Ave 2. On those parking lots, Taglia Home and the bank branch, those would be demolished, and that 1.75 acre area of land would be developed for use as 52 stacked townhomes with about 113 parking spaces, both garages and surface spaces. And there was also a minimum of 18, but we believe it's going to be closer to about 26 public parking spaces that will be generated as part of that. That would be not dedicated in land, but dedicated by way of a permanent license or some other arrangement with the city, so that, with the town. So that Garwood would have use of those 26, 25, but a minimum of 18 parking spaces. That was discussed with the council, that was discussed with Redevelopment Council, and that was what was crafted in the settlement agreement. The fortunate thing that we have going for us is Fair Share, I don't think, will object to the nature of the product. Fair Share Housing and the special master that was appointed by the court is really concerned with the generation of those minimum of 8 units or 15% of the housing that's developed on South Ave 2, whichever is greater. As long as we achieve that in terms of the rental units that are developed on the site, we'll be able to modify the settlement. And it was raised during the joint planning meeting that they're not certain, the council and members of the planning board are not certain that the 52-unit stacked townhome product is really what is desirable or most desirable to the community and for the benefit of the community for a number of reasons that we'll discuss. One of which is the number of 3-bedroom units, concerns about impact to the school system and other municipal impacts by that plan. We were asked, and at the last joint planning meeting, we presented an alternative plan to that 52-unit stacked townhome plan, which is a departure from what preceded that plan. Originally, we were looking between 80 and 90, or maybe as many as 100 apartment units on South Ave 2. We retreated off of that somewhat dramatically and generated the 52-unit stacked townhome plan. And then when we were asked to look again at an alternative to the townhomes, we came back to an apartment plan, but far lower density, far shorter in terms of height, much lower building, lower massing of the building. And it's resulted in about 70, and again, conceptually, about 73 residential apartment units, mostly smaller units, not many 3 bedrooms at all, much lower bedroom count, and frankly, an overall reduction in the amount of bedrooms from the 52-unit townhomes to the apartments. So we achieved a lot of what we had heard from the Joint Planning Commission. We increased green space, we increased parking, we decreased the impervious area, we decreased the bedroom count, we lowered the building mass, and we reduced the number of units somewhat significantly. So we're here tonight really to show you and give you some context and some understanding of those 2 alternatives that have been discussed between the redeveloper and the Joint Planning Committee. There's not going to be a decision made tonight. We're not going to hand out ballots, and it's not going to be a vote this evening. But it really is to give you an opportunity to ask questions of both the redeveloper and the members of your governing body and your planning board that are here tonight, and your redevelopment professional, Mr. Northgrave, so that, again, we can continue to work collaboratively as we did on the north side development to generate the best possible plan that is both feasible, financeable, and sustainable, both for the municipality and for the developer. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Russo, who's again principal of the developer. We also have Josh Wachel, who is a project engineer. Josh is really here to make sure that Ed and I don't mess up the computer, because we actually have a number of computer slides that we're going to be utilizing to share and really bring you through the 2 alternative projects.
Thanks, Chris. And again, we appreciate Mayor Lombardo and the rest of the Garwood community for inviting us back for another town hall meeting. I think Chris gave a very good overview of the lead up to where we are in the process. And tonight, we wanted to spend some time presenting the 2 different development plans that have been discussed regarding the south parcel. We're going to start with a 3D model that we built that shows not just what we're proposing for the south side of the development, but also the building that has been, I would say, 95% of the time at this point, through construction documents for the north side development. We do have a planning board meeting next week for our site plan application for the north lot development. And even though our purpose tonight is to really focus on the south lot, you're going to see a lot of images of both phases of the development, and we're happy to answer any questions that come up regarding either. So, starting out, what you're looking at right now is basically a aerial of a SketchUp model that we built that not only shows our proposed development, but also shows a number of the surrounding structures modeled as closely as we could using photographs that we took of a number of commercial buildings, residential homes, Google Earth, and other data that we have to build a model. What I'm going to ask Josh to do as I present different views of the proposed development is to pan through the model, and we're going to show you a number of different views of all sides of both phases of the project. And as we go along, I'll try to take little breaks and ask for any questions. This way you have an opportunity to provide comment in real time. This model has 2 different versions of the south lot development. One, as Chris alluded to, is a stacked townhome project of 52 units, and the other is a 3-story apartment building. So we're going to start with the apartment building, which is the latest plan that's been presented to the Garwood governing body, to the planning board, and then we'll also show you some images of the 3D model of the stacked townhome project. So can everybody see fairly well? I know it's a little bit tough with the light, but this is, everybody can see okay? Yeah. This is an image looking at the north side development at the intersection of Center Street and South Avenue. So essentially, you're looking to the north towards, you can see the rail line in the background. And this just gives you a little bit of perspective of the north side development relative to the surrounding streetscape. This is a view also of the north side development that shows the retail courtyard, retail plaza. We're going to be providing a lot of testimony regarding the design of the space during our planning board meeting. This was a key element in the redevelopment plan to have a large, open, 9,000 to 10,000 square foot gathering space opposite Borough Hall, where not only visitors of the retail for the development could congregate, but also the community could congregate during various events that could be held during the course of the year. This is a view that's looking down South Avenue towards Westfield, very close to the intersection of Center Street, but a little bit west of that intersection along South Avenue. And here, I apologize, I don't have a laser pointer, but you can see on the left-hand side of the image, the edge of the proposed building for the south lot. It's 3 stories of residential, or 3 stories of total height. 2 stories would be occupied with apartment units. The entire ground floor of the building would be occupied with covered parking. And you can see, looking at this image, that there's a significant difference in the height of the proposed buildings, north lot versus the south lot. The north lot, and Josh can throw a quick measurement on this so you can see it, from the floor elevation to the highest point of the 4th floor is approximately 54 feet. Is that correct? It's about 55 feet, okay. And you'll notice the 4th floor of the building along South Avenue is set back from the 3rd floor elevation. As we slide a little further down South Avenue, and Josh, pan around so you can see the south side development. Josh, we'll come back. Go to the next scene. Go back one scene. So this is the image we were just looking at. This is the main pedestrian entrance to. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Tip the mic right to you. Right in your face.
Okay. This shows the. There we go. I don't project as much as Chris. This is the main pedestrian entrance into the building, the north lot development. This is immediately opposite the driveway entrance into the south lawn. And Josh, if you can pan just a little bit to the right so people can see where the entrance is to the parking garage. It's hard to see behind that tree, but basically you have on the inside corner of the building the main access into the leasing office, the ground floor amenity spaces, and then on the right side of the image you can see there's a roll-up door that would go into the parking deck. Skip ahead a couple slides, Josh. Okay, this is also on South Avenue. This is now looking back to the east, right? So we're looking at about 180 degrees from the last image. And here, again, you can get a good sense of the difference in height and design between the 2 different phases. So on the left-hand side of the image, you're seeing the north lot development. And on the right-hand side of the image, you're seeing the south lot. And Josh, if you throw a quick measurement on the south lot, we're looking at a total building height. This rendering shows a 37-foot building. I think in reality, once the final design is done, it could be somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 feet. as a maximum. But, you know, the instruction that we had from, you know, the borough's professionals, the planning board members of the governing body was that in order for the south lot to fit within the surrounding residential community and to be something that, you know, they were comfortable endorsing, it had to be of a lower height and a significantly lower density than the north lot. And I think, you know, as we look at different images of the building, you'll recognize that not only is it significantly lower and smaller than what's, you know, being proposed on the north lot, but it also is pretty close in height to a number of the surrounding structures. Go one more, Josh. So this is an image that's taken from the intersection of West and Willow, looking towards the east. So now you're looking at the side of the proposed apartment building that would face the residential homes on Willow. And we tried to model the homes as accurately as we could in terms of height and setback from the street and the right of way. We measured a number of the homes. A number of the homes had a top elevation to the peak of roof of anywhere between 30 and 35 feet. So our proposed building is, you know, several feet higher, but, you know, we still think that it fits within the, you know, the context and the surrounding, you know, more residential properties as opposed to some of our neighboring properties on the north lot. One more, Josh. Okay. Similarly, this is another view looking down Willow, except looking towards Westfield, looking to the west now. And you can see some of the homes that are on the right-hand side of the image. These are the homes that back up to the fire department, Borough Hall. You can see in the background the proposed building, and then all of the structures that you're seeing on the left, those are on the south side of Willow Street. Now, this is an image that shows the proposed stacked townhome plan that we had originally presented to the borough. And it's a little hard to see from this distance, but Josh, if you go to one of the next images, go back one more to 13. Okay, so we flipped over to the other side of the development, right? So now we're back on South Avenue, looking towards the southwest. This is the proposed apartment building, and the next slide is going to show the municipal lots in the foreground. So this we'll talk a little bit more about this. Chris alluded to the fact that providing additional public parking is very important to the borough and the discussions that we had about the South Lot development. Our proposed stacked townhouse plan provided a total of 18 parking spaces for the borough, in addition to the 7 or 8 spaces that exist along the fire department. With our proposed apartment plan, we actually pick up a significant amount of additional surface parking because the building is, the footprint area of the building is less than the footprint of the stacked townhomes. And when we get to our site plan, I can walk you through exactly where those surface parking spaces would be. But here, if you look at this image and then you compare it to the very next one, which is what the stacked townhomes would look like. We don't have a lot of landscaping in front of the buildings at this point because we wanted you to see what the structures look like, but you can see from a height point of view, you know, from a total floor area, from a massing point of view, you know, a 3-story townhome with a pitched roof, which is important to make it feel like a residential structure, is higher than our proposed apartment building with a flat roof. So just to go back to the last slide, Josh, you can see here sort of the before and then the after. I think from the borough's point of view, not only were there concerns about the number of 3-bedroom units in the stacked townhome development, half of the units were 3 bedrooms, half of the units were 2 bedrooms, but in terms of the mass of the development, I think that the apartment building was anticipated to be a little bit more fitting relative to some of the surrounding properties. This is another view on South Avenue, looking back to the east now. And you can see here, these were the proposed townhomes. And then that's the proposed apartment building. And this is just a view looking at, from the north side of North Avenue facing to the south. So before we go on to any more plans or exhibits, I just wanted to take a little pause here and see if anybody has any questions or comments regarding the model as we presented it.
I was question about aesthetics. The condos look like pretty cookie cutter, like looks like a prison building or something like that. There's nothing to it. There's no design.
The
really.
design that we use, we go back to, Josh, why don't you do more of a forward-facing view of the townhomes, so you can see a little bit more. So can you get down to street level?
It just sort of, looks like a computer glitch happened and it reproduced the same thing over and over. There's no rhythm to it.
Well, typically for this type of product, what you can see varied, that's not reflected here, is the color of the siding. But in terms of the size of the windows,
Yeah.
the mix between masonry, which you have on the ground floor of the building, and siding, which would normally be above. I mean, this exact product is being built right now by several home builders. Pulte is a good example to use. There's a project in Woodridge called Westmont Station. That's really what this was modeled after. There aren't that many stacked townhome projects that have been built in this part of New Jersey. A couple have been built in Montvale. The one I just mentioned in Woodridge is another good example. But, even though this looks kind of plain, for lack of a better word, this is, from a massing point of view, this is pretty typical of what stacked townhome product is. And granted, this is a rendering that's not 100% done, but it gives you a good idea of.
I'm just more of design-wise. It's like plain oatmeal. There's nothing to it. Whereas the apartments look 500% better aesthetically.
Part of the reason for that is if you, Josh, pull up our site plan for the stacked townhomes.
Are you familiar with, there's like some condos they built on an Asbury Park on Cookman? There's like a whole block of them. It sort of reminds me of that. Just
Yeah, we're talking about. Go ahead.
It's got an Asbury Park. They went up like 6 or 7 years ago. They're on the right-hand side before you reach the carousel, and it's just like this big long block of just the same.
On your way to the beach.
On your way to the beach on the
Before you
right.
make the left,
Yeah.
go north.
Yep. And just,
Part of the challenge with the design of the stacked townhomes is that we originally started with fewer, more buildings that were smaller in size.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of having 4 buildings that had over 52 units, originally we had 6 buildings that instead of having 12 and 14 units each, we had one that had 8, we had another one that had 10. Well, the issue with that is we weren't able to provide enough public parking in order to address some of the borough's concerns about supporting Borough Hall and the fire department. So we combined 2 of the buildings into 2 other buildings that were on the plan, went from 6 total buildings to 4. Now, as a result of that, the buildings ended up getting a little bit longer than you would typically see, and that's part of what you're noticing when you look at the elevations. It looks very repetitive. It's because the buildings are very long. They're modular.
it's just aesthetically, there's no, when looking at the plan of the apartments there on the site, it's sort of like a letter E, there's voids and positive, negative space, and it just flows. It looks good. And this just looks like somebody just plopped the building down. In layman's terms.
I can.
There's no visual interest.
We can talk more about this.
Yeah.
I don't want to take too, but I can show you some images of completed projects that rendering-wise look exactly like we're showing. But if you look at an image, you would say, you know what, that doesn't look as bad as the rendering. Sometimes, the renderings, and we're looking at one siding color. If you vary the siding color a little bit, that will a little different look. But in terms of window sizes, brick, setbacks from the street, pitch of the roof, they're pretty accurate.
Can you just tell me how the townhomes are being built? You said there are 3 stories. Does 3 stories belong to one townhome? Like, if there's like basement, main floor, and the bedrooms?
2 of the stories would be split between 2 units. So all of the 3rd floor and half of the 2nd floor would be 1 unit. All of the 1st floor and half of the 2nd floor would be 1 unit.
So you would just
So
go
no.
from the floor to go up or down?
You would go in a door on the ground floor. You would either walk into your apartment if you lived on the 1st floor and half of the 2nd floor, or if you lived on in the upper unit, you'd go up a set of steps. The entrance to your apartment would be on the 2nd floor, and then you'd have an internal set of steps to get to the 3rd floor. So no, you wouldn't be walking up 2 flights of steps within your unit if you lived on the 3rd floor.
And that's how it's going to be built for all the townhomes? So it's one building, the 2
Yes.
townhomes next to
Each, it's a little hard to see on here, but these lines that we see vertically going through units, each one of these is 2 units. It's about 21, 22 feet wide, and we can pull a floor plan and I can show you the difference between how the first 2 floors are laid out versus the other floors, but essentially, every 22 feet you have 2 units.
And the set is identical. You might be just like,
There's some variations, but for the most part, you have 2 unit types, 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom. The corners are a little bit different than the internal units, but they're very, very close.
what would they be valued at if it was to go for sale?
There aren't a ton of comps for this type of product, but if you look at this project I mentioned before in Woodridge, or Westmont Station, if you look at other conventional townhome sales that have occurred in this part of Union County, our feeling was that they'd be priced somewhere in the $400,000 range, maybe a little bit higher for the market rate units.
2-bedroom or for 3-bedroom?
For a 2-bedroom would likely be in the low 4s, and a 3-bedroom would be in the high 4s. But unlike the apartment market, where there's significantly more comparables in places like Westfield or Cranford or Clark or other surrounding towns, there's not a lot of this type of product being built in this area, so it's a little bit more difficult to predict what the sale prices will be.
Square footage?
A typical 2-bedroom unit would be, 1,800 to 2,200 square feet, and a typical 3-bedroom unit could be as much as 25 to 2,800 square feet. So they're significantly larger than an apartment 2-bedroom unit. Would typically be around 1,100 to 1,200 square feet. And an apartment 3-bedroom unit would typically be around 1,400 square feet.
Could you explain why on the 73 rental unit you have 8 3-bedrooms, and on the 52 townhomes you have 26 3-bedrooms?
Sure. In a stacked townhome product, you have very little flexibility to increase or decrease the size of units, because you're not laying the units out horizontally like you are in an apartment building. You're laying them out vertically. So when we're designing an apartment building and we're working off of 12 or 12 and a half or 13-foot modules, a typical 1-bedroom unit is 2 modules, right? So about 25 feet wide. On one module, you might have your kitchen, your dining area, your living area, and in the other module, you have your bedroom and your bathroom. So if we were going to have a 2-bedroom unit, we would have 3 modules. If we were going to have a 3-bedroom unit, you'd have 4. And if you wanted to reduce the number of, say, 2 or 3-bedroom units that you had, you could just allocate some of those 12 to 12 and a half foot modules to smaller units and spread floor area throughout the building pretty efficiently, because you're working horizontally. In a stacked townhome unit, you're fixed by the footprint of that unit, and without dramatically changing the style of the product, you don't have as much flexibility to alter unit size. So we've had a lot of discussion about this exact issue, because we can set our 3-bedroom number at almost any number in the apartment building. In the Stack Townhall product, if we said we want to build less three-bedroom units because there's concern from the community about number of bedrooms, that floor area that you would pick up by eliminating a bedroom, you have to use for some other purpose. You can't add it to a unit that's a floor below you. You can't really add it horizontally because you have firewalls between every module, which is a code requirement. You end up with a den, you end up with a bonus room, but your unit's really not changing much. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Is there a possibility of the 73 rental units and reducing that number a little lower?
Reducing the number of,
Units.
we've already reduced the floor area of the building significantly from what was originally proposed. And we could reduce the number of units, but what would end up happening is we would probably end up with the same number of bedrooms because we might be taking a couple one-bedroom units and combining them into a three-bedroom unit. So even though the number of units might go from 73 to 72 or 71, you're still ending up with about the same amount of floor area and the same amount of bedrooms. And just for comparison, this plan, the 52-unit Stack Townhall plan, had about 130 bedrooms. The 73-unit apartment plan has just under 110 bedrooms. So even though it's more units, it's significantly different unit distribution, so there's less floor area, less bedrooms.
Thank you.
One thing that's important to keep in mind, we do have an obligation to have certain percentages and minimum numbers of different types of units with respect to the affordables. So even if we were able to do a plan that eliminated 3 bedrooms, for example, we would not be able to eliminate the affordable 3 bedrooms. So that part of the project still has to be available to the development. And frankly, the apartment plan really minimizes the number of market rate 3 bedrooms dramatically below that, which was contemplated on the townhall plan.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, no, excuse me, on the stack, how do you have individual garages in there? In that inside corridor?
There are individual garages, so if you look at this model, right, there's 2 units here, 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom. Each unit would get 1 garage and 1 parking space in the driveway to the garage. So you have 2 parking spaces per unit, but they're in tandem.
Okay.
One's in the garage, one's in front.
As opposed to the flat top, the whole inside or the whole lower floor is gonna be open?
It's going to be covered parking, so we can.
Just covers parking, everything is gonna be accessible.
Did you ever see in New York, they have the brownstone? Okay, just like a brownstone.
So if you look at
I
sheet
have one, you know.
A1.1 in the handout, this shows the ground floor of the proposed apartment building. You can see the parking layout here. So you would enter the ground level parking in one of 2 locations. There's one driveway off the Willow and another off the west. So the parking is, it's not dedicated in individual garages like you would have on the townhome plan. It's in an open floor plan, not unlike what you would see in,
But you could actually have more parking places on the flat top.
if you count the driveway spaces that we have in front of the garages, you have more parking spaces per unit on the townhome plan, but you have more total parking spaces on this plan. The demand for parking for apartment product is less on a per unit basis than it is for, for sale townhomes, which is why the parking ratio is a little bit lesser.
Okay, the other question I have was brought up on the north side, construction, phase 1, let's call it. Elevators, you have elevators in there now, or?
Yes,
Okay, and you can have elevators in this one?
yes. This building would have a minimum of 1 elevator, more likely 2. The north lot building is designed with 4 elevators.
I have one question though. Okay, we put up a building on South Avenue on, on both sides now. Are we doing this thing all at one time, or are we going to do one side, get it done, and work on the other side? Because we
North-
really don't need South Avenue tied up like nobody's living.
Our intent is to phase the project. So the first, the north side of South Avenue would be built first.
Okay.
Given where we stand today, our hope would be to start demolition and remediation in the early part of next year. We probably have a good 5 to 6 months before we could start building construction. By the
How
time we
much soil they got to dig out of there, too?
a significant amount of remediation has to be done. We just got, last week, approval from the EPA to proceed with demolition and remediation, which was a 25-month process, so it's a long time in the making. But figure middle of next year to start construction, it's probably a 20-month project, start to finish. So by the time phase 1 was finished and fully occupied, would likely be sometime in mid to late 2020. That's the earliest we intend to start construction on the south lot. Because we need the south lot parking to stage material, to park construction work of vehicles, so it would be very, very difficult logistically to build both at the same time.
I just have one, are you contacting the Department of Traffic about putting traffic lights?
We have an application into Union County.
Yeah.
South Avenue is a county road, so they're reviewing our application, and they're going to decide whether any improvements are required to the right of way in order to accommodate both phases.
Townhouses. It said on our sheet that we got the flyer that the town would be responsible for garbage and the sewer and that kind of thing. But I was wondering why they wouldn't have an association, homeowners association, as many condo communities have. The condo.
There would definitely
That
be,
would pay for the lumber. I personally know lots of people that live in homeowners insurance, have an association. They pay a fee, fees a board.
there would definitely be a homeowners association. And I can't say that there have been any cases where homeowner associations can contract privately for snow removal or waste removal, but typically in a for sale community, services that would normally be provided to single-family homes throughout the community, like waste pickup, carting services, would continue to be provided to the community. In a lot of cases, that's also true for apartment projects, except in a case where the property owner decides that it's more efficient for them to provide waste removal. And if
Are you saying that our ordinances or the way our current garbage collection is set up?
there's no question that if the homeowners association did not want to take care of garbage privately, if they went to the borough and said, listen, and Mr. Menard can speak to this, we want to use the public carting services, that the borough would have to provide those services. Differently than it would have to provide it for any, homeowner in town.
But snow plowing or
Snow plowing would be different because there's no public roads on the property, so the driveways would have to be plowed and maintained by the homeowners association.
The townhome, it was said that it was likely for sale. What does that mean? Like, are you gonna actually sell it, or, are you gonna have people buy it, or?
They would be for sale.
They would be for
They're
sale.
really not, the units are too large to, on a square foot basis, to be viable on a rental basis. So the only time that you're really seeing townhomes or stacked home town product being built is if the units are being built with the intent of being sold, with the exception of the affordable housing units, which we've had there's been some debate over this between us and the special master who's presiding over affordable housing action. They want to see the units as a rental product, regardless of whether they're townhomes or apartments, because of
So if they're for sale, then those people who buy it actually pay taxes, correct?
that's correct.
So, technically, they're paying for their own, the sewer and garbage and the snow plows are included in the tax. Well, not the garbage is. So I'm not understanding why it's a problem. If it's going for sale, I mean, it's like if they're buying a house. You had mentioned that
All I had said was, it's not a given that if it's for sale product, that the homeowners association would be paying for waste disposals. It's more likely that they would be relying on public services for waste disposal. For things like landscaping and snow plowing, those would be, I mean, it's private property, those would be separate contract.
so you're saying the homeowners association may not pay that?
Yes.
No. Okay, but
The service that, I think the literature, I haven't seen it, but whatever was sent around by the borough regarding services might have alluded to the fact that with townhomes, there'd be a cost to the borough that would not be there if it was apartment product. And then with respect to waste collection, that's accurate.
but I don't know what.
If the property's for sale, they own it, and they pay garbage taxes, garbage will pick up the
Right,
garbage.
so then there wouldn't be a problem if children go to school and they're paying towards the property.
Exactly.
Right, correct? Okay, so then why would you rent them?
How many units are for sale? I got here a little late. How many units are for sale?
Under one plan version that we presented, there would be 52 units
Okay.
total, of which 44 would be for sale.
44 for sale, do they each get taxed individually?
Yes.
Yes. So it's like buying, it's a condo, the condo purchase, not fee simple, correct?
That's correct.
Right. So there's a condo association, there are condo fees, but you pay taxes individually, right? You're collecting property taxes for each of those units. The same way you collect from a homeowner. And then those individual units are entitled, those homeowners are entitled to services from the town, correct?
That's correct.
Now, on to the next step. Why did you say that you were to rent?
There, most
I don't
apartment
mean to start
renters,
out
someone
renting.
that, in the market, if you look at most renters that are looking for an apartment or a home that's for rent in this part of Union County, whether it's Union Township to the east, all the way out to Fanwood or Plainfield to the west, I call it the Eastern Union submarket.
Really? Okay. What are you saying?
The demand that we see is, on a rental basis, is primarily for smaller apartment units, not for stacked homes. And even, let's assume that you could rent a two-bedroom apartment in an apartment building, not in a stacked town home unit. It was, $26, $700, $800 a month to rent that unit. It's half the size of a two-bedroom for-sale unit. There's no market for two-bedroom townhome units that are $35,000 or $4,000 a month. So you end up with only a little bit more in rent for a unit that costs substantially more to build. And that's why, from a development point of view, it's very difficult.
I'm not challenging, I'm saying for marketing, but for the town's benefit, is it better that we are selling 44 units and getting taxes for the town, or that they're also available for rent or sale? Or are you going to allow the homeowner, after they spend a year in the unit, then rent it? See, I'm thinking about what's beneficial to the town tax-wise, and I'm coming in very late.
I don't want to speak for the borough, but from the feedback that we've received, and a lot of these comments were made at a planning board hearing, there was a public hearing that was held about a month or so ago.
Yes.
I think there's concern that with anytime you have for sale product where the units by nature are larger, meaning larger 2-bedroom, larger 3-bedroom units, and more 2- and 3-bedroom units than what you would have for an apartment development, there's the risk that the borough's cost of providing services to those units, whether they're for rent or they're for sale, they're larger units, is going to be greater than it would be for smaller apartment units, particularly in the case of 3-bedroom units, which, if you look at the state's data, take school-age children, just as an example. The state, through Rutgers, commissioned a study over 10 years ago that studied apartment projects throughout the state, and they came up with ratios of the number of children that would come out of 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom housing, whether it's for rent or for sale. The state concluded that 3-bedroom units generate 4 to 5 times the number of school-age children as 2-bedroom units. 2-bedroom units generate twice the amount of school-age children as 1-bedroom units. So I think it's that possibility, even though we believe in this part of Union County, if you look at other projects that have been built, the number of school-age children that have been generated has been relatively low on a per unit basis. Put that aside and recognize that across the state, generally, larger units generate more kids. That could be a reason why the municipal costs are higher, notwithstanding the fact that the taxes might be higher. It doesn't tend to offset the cost as much as it does with apartment projects.
If I buy a unit and I live in it for a year or 2, will I be allowed to rent it then?
That's
What's
really-
going to be the rules about?
It really comes down to the rules of the homeowners association, and I guess it would also, if there's an ordinance in town that includes renting units, which I know there's homes for rent throughout Garwood. I think it would really come down to the rules of the homeowners association.
It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's a townhouse or anything else. You can't prohibit rentals, even if they're for sale, so simply not.
One other point to
Rainwater. Obviously, you know the FEMA situation in this town. Willow Avenue is considered
Might all turn into rentals.
the rainwater being channeled into Garwood Brook. Does this building fall, how does that fall within FEMA's base flood elevation? Because I know what I'm doing for flood. I know what my neighbors who are moving out of town because of flood. We had a town hall meeting with FEMA basically telling us that, we live in hell on account of flooding. Are we going to be subjected to additional premiums to cover this property if it falls within that floodplain?
So we would be required to demonstrate that our design for the entire development met not only the borough's stormwater management requirements, but the DEP's stormwater management requirements. And just in general, those requirements say you can't create more runoff from your property than currently exists pre-development. You can't increase the amount of pollutants in groundwater or surface water beyond what currently exists. So we would have to do 2 things in order to meet the borough and DEP's requirements. We have to show that the rate of runoff leaving the site was equal to or less than what's there today. And we'd have to treat the runoff through some type of mechanical water quality device, which is are typical for projects like this, to demonstrate that we've addressed both issues.
Right, well, right now, it's probably raining inside of the salad, so there is no runoff. If you guys start collecting the rainwater and channeling it to the brook, we're gonna have a tidal wave coming down below it.
We'd be happy.
In addition to what Ed indicated is the requirement, not only from the municipality, but also from the DEP, we would have to prove, by proving that the rate is equal or better, meaning slower, and that the volume is equal or less than what is currently there today, which, regardless of what it is today, if it's part of a problem, we have to make it, we can't make it worse, And based on a recent meeting that I had with our borough engineer, our project engineer, Douglas Bartels, who was at the last town hall, and Vic Vinegra, your town engineer, we actually established with respect to the north side development that we are not only maintaining, but we're actually exceeding our obligation to reduce, and we're reducing the amount of discharge of rainwater from the Casali and Petrocello, the north side parcels, that all of that acreage, by on-site detention. The nature of the way the system is designed, the water is detained or held within our system for a period of time that will actually ameliorate some of what you're existing now, what's coming off of the Casali and Petro sites now. We're pretty confident that we're going to have the same kind of success on phase 2. And one of the main reasons is because phase 2 is, for all intents and purposes, 100% impervious right now. It's just a sheet. All the water's just running wherever it wants to run without any controls. So once we add green space, which is pervious space, it's going to dramatically slow down and eliminate some of that runoff. And on top of that, there will be on-site detention as is necessary to make sure that it further betters the situation. It's not our obligation to better it, but I think we're going to have an opportunity to do so.
But are they looking further, I mean, what's the footprint that they're looking at the discharge? Because that,
It's the whole site.
but that property would made up to say the 400 block of Willow and Myrtle. Are they looking down at the 100 block with that Brook 90s where
As a
we're
matter of
being held
fact, Mr.
accountable?
Vinegra required us, as part of our site plan application for the north side, to do a study, to look down, to actually, I think they scoped and cambered some of those inflow pipes, those inlets, and to give him some data so that he can better understand what's going on today. Now understand, there is an existing problem today, and we're confident that our development is actually going to better that. It is not our legal obligation by any means, nor is it anyone else's obligation to better an existing problem in the municipality. But because we truly want to be good neighbors and we're really encouraged about this project, where we can, we are. And Mr. Bartels actually increased the sizes of some of the pipes on the north side project site in order to show Vic that, you know what, we don't have to because we've already achieved our obligation, but we're going to increase the detention on the site just to help better the situation today. So even though it's not our obligation, we are making those little steps to better it, and we provided the data to Mr. Vinegra's office so that he is better armed for future developments, not just us, but any other future development that may take place along the South Ave corridor. He already has greater information than he did 2 days ago, so that he can better design and advise future development.
Just last comment we'll make about this. Besides, what Chris is saying, our on-site stormwater management systems work, holiday detention, just if you look at it face value, this is an aerial of the South Lot today. Less than 5% of the property is open space, right? There's a little bit of open space behind the single-family home that fronts on South Avenue. There's a little bit of open space around the perimeter of the site. Our proposed apartment plan has over 20% open space, and I think the Stockton home plan was around 15%. So either alternative is going to be a significant increase in pervious area, open space, green space, on top of the fact that our stormwater management improvements, hopefully will make a meaningful impact on what we're seeing today.
Well, that's just a concern. I mean, with you developing and then channelizing the water, right now it's just puddling up. It's not running off where it's going to be when you finish. I mean,
Water is leaving the sites currently, and we can.
I understand it, but you haven't been through the meetings to hear the severity from FEMA on how terrible that this town should have never been developed. That's how bad they say it is. We're getting hit with 18% increases on our premium over the next 5 years, and they say that's all based on county obligations. We're paying for rebuilds in Branford, we're paying for rebuilds back in the 70s. Now, you put up a $200 million building, something happens, first floor gets wiped out, we're going to be held liable.
I don't want
I'm just
to cut
saying,
you
I
off.
know
It's an
that's
important
running
issue,
off,
but I would
just-
encourage you to come to the planning board hearings because there'll be a significant amount of testimony with respect to stormwater management and drainage design. And that's, we can really, with the benefit of having our engineer there, who's not here tonight, really get into more detail about how the project's designed. Hopefully that'll address your
It's a
concern.
very big concern, though, and most people are just defeated. They gave up the whole FEMA fight, so.
Thank you.
Just quick yes or no, is there a retail element with the apartments on two?
There's no proposed retail on the south lot. There's a fairly significant amount of retail planned for the north lot development, which I can take you through if you're interested. If you're just asking about the south lot, there
Just
is none.
like square footage wise, is it like big spaces on one? And was there ever thought of putting mixed use retail on phase two also? No, just out of curiosity.
We would have enough space. And we have enough parking.
The answer is no, there was not a consideration about retail on phase two. There was a lot of discussion and design, collaborative design effort that went into phase one with the joint committee that was impaneled during that process. And one of the issues that was desirous and was expressed to us from your planner and engineers and members of the planning board from early on about phase two was creating a sense of place or a sense of space on phase one because we recognize that it is a central element of the downtown directly across from Townhall. And that's why we set it back and created that public plaza area.
Two questions. You had mentioned, first question, I'm sure this is your status. You had mentioned the EPA had come in last week and spoke about the history there is interesting. They're worrying that sort of, once you start digging that up, or plans to happen in here, check it out.
So the primary, we've done an extensive amount of groundwater and soil sampling on the property dating back to the early part of 2014. And we submitted our original application to the EPA, who has jurisdiction over this particular project because the main contaminating concern is PCBs, and it's in the soil at levels that exceed the applicable DEP limits, which are 0.2 parts per million for residential standards. Once you get over 10, you become subject to EPA jurisdiction. And we have contaminants in some parts of the site that are over 3,000 parts per million. So, make a long story short, we did testing for the better part of a year and a half. We submitted our proposed remedial action work plan to the EPA 2 years ago. We had an extensive amount of back and forth. They inspected the site a number of times. They asked us to do more sampling. We did that, and ultimately, they approved our cleanup plan.
So my question is, once you get in there,
The plan speaks not just to what parts of the site are being remediated, but it speaks to how is it being remediated and how is it being done in a way that's protective of not only the environment, but human health. And I'd be happy to, all of our documents are
I just
public
remember
record.
a number of years ago, something said that they weren't there.
I'd be pretty confident saying I don't think we're going to find any surprises. We have hundreds and hundreds of borings. But it's a significant remediation project for a site this size. And you're going to see, once the buildings come down, fencing's going to go up, screening's going to go up. There's going to be a lot going on behind the fence. But it's going to be done in a very careful and controlled way.
Yeah, I guess to help. Second question, all these apartments going up on the corridor, I know, for instance, Woodmount, which is anchors, 2 years old, they can't sell out. They've had to allocate another apartments section. We're having problems. So do you have a backup plan if you can't sell out?
I'm not sure that's accurate. I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any section. There's affordable housing.
No, they have had to allocate another apartments section.
I'm not sure that's correct, but I can tell you, we'd be happy to provide
So I guess the question
market
is,
information on other projects. The vacancy rate right now in Cranford, in Westfield, in Garwood, and some of the surrounding communities is, it varies between 2% and 6% depending on the community, but it's fairly low.
okay, so if you could, with all, I'm sure you did study, can't sell it, you have that.
If we can't lease the apartments. So there's no question that there's risk building projects like this. By the time you start, when you start, better part of 2 years before you're finished, the market could be very different at the time you finish than it is at the time you start. But really, what our experience has been, and I think this has been well documented, we know we can rent the units. The question is going to be, what rents are we going to get? We might be forced to accept rents that are lower than what we pro forma originally if the market corrects or if there's a softening, which, we're hoping that's not going to be the case. We think that the rent assumptions that we've used are reasonable but not overly optimistic. And we have to be prepared. If we build a building and the rents are lower, we're not going to have an empty building sitting there. We're going to fill it, but it might be at a lower rent than we would hope.
Just on Julie's question, are they definite for sale units there? Because the price of you say definite?
No, it's probably more likely that there will not be any for sale units as part of this project, as part of the southbound development. My only point is that if the project that's ultimately built is stacked townhome product, not apartment product, then the units, the market rate units would be for sale. If it's not stacked townhome product, if it's, apartment buildings, then they would be for rent. With respect to, we're here tonight to get comments from the community, and I think the planning board and the governing body is going to make a decision. I think I've answered your question. For the South Island? We submitted a fiscal impact study as part of our applications for the phase 1 development, the North Lot development. And when we submitted that study, we included not only statewide data that was published by Rutgers that suggests the number of children that could be generated by 1 and 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, but we also surveyed a number of existing communities in Cranford, Garwood, Westfield. We wrote letters to the Board of Education, requested data from them, how many school-age children are, being generated in these different developments. And the resulting number is very, very low, somewhere in the range of 2, 3, 4 children per 100 units. School-age children, not including children that are, outside of the age group of 5 to 18, school-age children. And I'd be happy to provide a copy of our report and our survey data, but there's a number of projects in the area that have no school-age children.
Another question? If, say, we get 50 kids, are you going to pay for additional? Yeah.
Notwithstanding the fact that we're very confident that the data is not only data that we provided, but it's data that's been relied on by the courts, by hundreds of applicants like us, and it's empirical data. It's also data that we've seen in our projects that have been completed, that we're witnessing firsthand that is accurate. And actually, it's conservative. We're seeing fewer than that. But one of the things you have to keep in mind is we're not only talking about school-age children, but the likelihood that you would have 50 kindergartners joining your community, or per year, and having that kind of an impact on your school system in perpetuity, never going to happen. The reality is, if you have even a dozen children, they'll be spread out over the 12 grades of your school system. And we also have a lot of evidence, as I'm sure you all realize. If you go back into the 70s and you look at the history of Garwood, you are still in a series and an experience of a declined enrollment in your school system. And when you have a small number of children at each grade level that are then moved through the system, and then you have periodic replenishment of school children from an apartment project like this, it does not move the needle. It does not result in the need for a new facility. You're not going to have trailers parked in the parking lot because you've run out of classrooms. And you're not going to need to even hire new teachers.
And this is a question, we've been planning this project since January of 2012, so we've had a number of hearings before the planning board, we've had town hall meetings, we've had community outreach meetings, and this is a topic that's gotten a lot of attention. And what I can say to you is, no one knows with 100% certainty how many school-age children would be generated by the development. But what I can say to you is that there's a tremendous amount of data that's available on other projects that are similar to what we're proposing, on data that the state publishes that's used for exactly this purpose, for projecting fiscal impacts for new development projects, which we'd be happy to share. We've published it, we've submitted it to the town, and I think all of the data suggests that the number of school-age kids that would be generated by developments that are primarily, we're building mostly studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom units. Very, very, very few 3-bedroom units, should be very low.
They're not conducive to families that are going to have 2 or 3 school-age children that are still living in an apartment. They're conducive to empty nesters, they're conducive to occupancy by young couples that may have an infant, that are looking to become members of that community. I have a big mouth, so this thing I think died, but I'll just speak louder.
I'm
These-
just
oh, I'm on.
concerned about overall enrollment that would come into the school, because I believe we're at capacity now.
No, you're not even close to capacity now. But more importantly, and I didn't want to ignore your question about finances. The reality is, as Mr. Russo said, the reports and the data that was submitted was not just blind, here's a school child. It was a report that was submitted in connection with a fiscal impact study. And the fiscal impact study shows that even if there are school children that are created by the project, there's enough of a fiscal benefit to the project, to the community, in the form of ratables, because the woman that was speaking about, it seemed like you were only going to get tax ratables if it was a for-sale product. That's absolutely not. If you're going to get a significant tax ratable, whether it's a for-sale product or it's a for-rent apartment, there's still going to be a piper. Someone's still going to own that unit, and they're going to be paying for it, whether it's the developer who holds the rental units or it's a single, the individual condo unit owner. There is going to be a tax paid, a substantial tax paid, and because, for example, the apartment unit does not consume other municipal services, there's a significant surplus that's generated, so that even if the worst occurred, and there were a number of school children that were unanticipated for a given year, and there was an influx, and you have, because the school population's got, I'm a Board of Education member in Mountainside. I know this firsthand. You have ebbs and flows of your school population, and you have to manage that in order to maintain your district. If you're on one of those, on that sine curve, if you're at a peak, and you have a project like this that's generating municipal surplus, and you have a governing body that's engaged with your school district, you're going to have the funds available. And you're going to have the means to pay for that service, because the school district is a service.
Thank you.
Very well.
Quick question, you assume that these are all going to be handicap accessible?
That the apartments,
Apartment-
yes, we have to be ADA compliant.
And just real quick, actually in Lyndhurst, I think one of those properties is yours, the kindergarten class double after your apartment building went there. It may be an anomaly, but they have to build another school over there. There's one of yours actually.
I'd be happy to provide actual school aid data for any of our projects. I can tell you, Garwood Lofts on the north side of North Avenue, 50 units, 0 school-age kids. Riverfront Station, 118 units. Cranford, with an affordable housing set aside, similar to what we have. 0 kids. And in Garwood, right? Garwood's public school system has about 500 kids.
I'm on board. We have 400 kids in our school.
Okay, so if you look
Other
at
grades, we are, as a town, we're getting younger, and there's a lot of younger families in, so we are seeing a number of kids, not before.
But enrollment, from 2006
Yeah.
to 2016, what's enrollment done in Garwood's public school
I don't know
system?
off the top of my head, but what I'm saying.
Come down, right?
The younger grades now are seeing more kids come into the school. The upper grades, they're not as high. So, yeah, we are growing because we are getting, we are a great town.
We might have 500 kids, however, from 9, 10, 11, 12, they go to high school. We don't have a high school, we don't have grammar school. So if you bring in 50 kids from kindergarten to 8th grade, that's going to be a sizable amount for
We
us.
pay per kid at the high school.
I think you have some people that may not have asked questions before.
I'm sorry, I didn't know what you said.
I'm just curious, the apartments, instead of apartment units for rent, is it in consideration to have them made condos for sale?
If there was a market for sale condos, flats, we would be the first, I'd be the first person who'd want to build them, to be honest with you, because they're far more valuable on a per unit basis than apartments. For the location that we're talking about, being right on top of the rail line, being in the center of town, and just building for sale product by nature as opposed to rental product, the demand is not really there today. It's not like, it never really got back to the point that it was 2004, 5, 6 in the peak of the for sale market in New Jersey. And I would say to you that if you look throughout the state at the projects that are being developed, meaning flats, not single family homes, exclude that, or conventional townhomes, outside of the waterfront, the Hudson River waterfront communities from Jersey City up to Fort Lee, outside of certain suburban communities like Morristown or Red Bank, where you're seeing some pockets of for sale condos being built, there is very, very little condo development happening in New Jersey because there just isn't demand for it.
I have a question regarding just time frame on the two projects. I know you started to say that the north would be done first. So you said in like the next 6 months we should see something already happening in terms of construction. But if you could just elaborate how long that project would take, and then when the other project would take. And we're new residents to Garwood. We just moved in not too long ago, about a year ago, and we actually live behind the empty lot. So we have two concerns as like new residents to Garwood, which is number one, traffic, because I actually take South Avenue to that left-hand turn every day to and from work. So traffic is definitely a concern, like I would imagine for a lot of the residents that are directly living in that vicinity. And number two, I know a lot of people also are concerned about taxes. So maybe if you can elaborate on those things in terms of, rental properties versus townhomes, how would those affect, and have you done any studies about what type of traffic is expected? What kind of implications would be for the existing homeowners, option one versus option two, and just elaborate a little bit on the time frame of that.
So your first question with respect to schedule, we hope to start demolition and remediation work on the north lot early next year, and we hope to start vertical construction sometime in the middle of 2018. We wouldn't complete development on the north lot until the middle of 2020, and we likely wouldn't start construction on the south lot until early 2021 at the soonest. It could be later than that, depending on how long it takes us to lease the first building. We want to be substantially leased in the first, on the north lot before we start on the south lot. In terms of traffic, we have submitted very detailed traffic impact statements to the borough, to the borough's professionals, to the planning board. So the borough has not commented yet on our traffic report. They've commented informally, but we haven't gotten a formal review. That should be forthcoming. We have a planning board meeting next week. We've also submitted our traffic data to the county, and we anticipate feedback from them as well. But traffic is something that's been studied in significant detail, and I can assure you that we're going to do everything that we're asked and required to do by the county and by the planning board.
And with taxes, any comments
With
regarding
respect to
that?
taxes, we do have a financial agreement with the borough that specifies how much, what percentage of the revenue from our project is going to be paid to the borough as, not a tax, but an annual service charge. It's like a real estate tax. The borough keeps a more significant portion of it than they would in conventional taxes. And we would anticipate having a similar agreement for the South Lot development. Because the South Lot redevelopment plan has not yet been adopted, we don't have an agreement yet with the borough for the South Lot. However, we anticipate that would happen sometime in 2018.
Is there going to be a light, traffic light on West Street and sometime in the intersection?
I don't want to speak for our traffic engineer because I don't, have as many of the details obviously as he would, and Doug Bartels could answer this better than me. But I don't believe that the warrants exist from the county's point of view to have a traffic signal there. The county really is the agency that has to determine whether or not mitigation is required along South Avenue. Willow, West, Center Street are local roads. South Avenue, Center Street might be a county road too. It's not too local road, but South Avenue is a county road. The county really is going to be the one that's going to have the most to say with respect to traffic and any mitigation that's required. And we don't expect that they would suggest or require a signal at West, but at this point, they're still reviewing our application.
Also, more or less a comment as a question. I feel as a homeowner, when you buy a townhouse, you care more about the community and the township compared to the tenant. Well, that's just my opinion.
Can you say that one more time? I heard most of it.
It's more like a comment than a question. If you're going to build a townhouse instead of an apartment building on the south side, I feel as a homeowner, I would care more about a township and a community compared to the tenant who just rent an apartment.
Okay, so what we've seen for the type of apartment product that we're proposing, which is anytime you're building new construction, the cost to build new are very significant, and the rents that you need in order to have an economically viable project are much, much higher than what they would be for 20 or 30 or 40-year-old apartments. So for someone that's going to move into an apartment building that's paying close to $2,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, close to $3,000 a month for a two-bedroom apartment, most of those people are renters by choice, not by necessity. And what I would say to you is, the type of resident that would be likely for our proposed development, I think are not unlike the people who live in Garwood today and the surrounding communities. We're not looking to attract people to Garwood that could not afford to live in the community. And I think when you have a ownership entity, unlike a homeowner association that's managing the property, you could argue that the quality of the development, not just how it's built and designed, but how it's managed well beyond construction being completed, is a little bit different than it could otherwise be if you had a homeowner association that might not be as compelled to manage the project the same way. Does that answer your question?
Mr. Russo, I think this evening we got a little bit off track. A lot of these issues will come up at future planning board meetings. So I think in comparing the two scenarios between the townhomes and the apartments from a high-level analysis, correct me if I'm wrong, 52 townhouses would yield 130 bedrooms, and in the 73 rental unit scenario, you're going to yield less bedrooms at 108?
That's correct.
Okay. Can you talk about any of the pros and cons of the two scenarios?
Sure. I think the pros of the stacked townhome plan is you know, it's always nice to have some variety, you know, and I'm speaking from the developer's point of view, and we can, I can try to think about it from the borough's point of view as well. From our point of view, it's nice to have a variety of product and not to have all the same type of product as one project. I think economically, because of the value of for-sale units and the fact that most of the product that's being built in this part of Union County is for rent, and you could argue that, you know, there could be demand for sale product that's not being met in the market. The value of the for-sale units relative to their cost is higher than it is for the apartment units. I think that the cons of the for-sale product relative to the apartments is the number of bedrooms is probably the most obvious choice. Very, very difficult to sell, you know, smaller 2-bedroom and smaller 3-bedroom units. You can rent them, but to sell them you can, and there's no market for 1-bedroom for-sale units. So having 1-bedroom for-sale units is not an option. Our apartment plan has over 60% studio apartments, so that's, I think, a big positive. And because we're investing so heavily in amenities for the north lot, it's a large building, it's close to 300 units. We have on-site leasing, we have an on-site club room, a gym, a large pool, courtyard areas. We feel that the apartments on the south lot, even though it's a smaller building, it's 73 units, we would have common ownership. Residents of the south lot would have the use of the north lot amenities, and you know, from our point of view, we hope that that would add value to the south lot units from a rental point of view. If the units were for sale, and you had a homeowners association that was you know, managing the south lot, you have different ownership, you're not going to have shared amenities. From the borough's point of view, I mean, I can try to speak to that. I don't know if Mayor wants to. The question was, you know, what are some of the pros and cons of the stacked townhome product versus the rental product?
Other than, I don't want to put the kibosh on it, but unfortunately, we've got a majority of the governing body here, so I really can't have the members of the governing body giving their opinions about the project.
I think, just to sum it up and try to answer it from the borough's point of view, you know, we've presented a number of different plans to the borough over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, not only on the north lot, but on the south lot. And, you know, we've had the benefit of not only hearing from members of the community, but also having feedback from the planning board and the governing body. And I think the message that we've heard is there's concerns about the for-sale product because of the number of 3-bedroom units, because of the floor area of the buildings, the number of total bedrooms, the uncertainty about how that type of product would be managed long-term, given that, you know, you have a homeowners association, you don't have a developer that's signing a developer's agreement that's on the hook to do certain things, you know, well after the project is built. And because of that, we've tried to put forward an apartment plan as an alternative that's less dense and smaller than some of the earlier plan concepts that were circulated, that provides more municipal parking, which has been an important consideration because of the shortage of parking adjacent to the fire department, adjacent to Borough Hall. And if you weigh, you know, the factors that we've talked about, and if we weigh the direction that we've received, I think it's clear that the apartment project is more desirable, not only because it's smaller, meaning less floor area, but because it's, you know, building heights are lower. Architecturally, we've heard a little bit of, you know, commentary about what the stacked townhome buildings look like relative to the apartment buildings. I mean, we could try to dress up the stacked townhome buildings and add more interest and make them nicer. I think you have more flexibility with apartment product because, you know, we want to build a more modern type of structure with glass and metal and brick. And I think it's tough to do that on a townhome that you're going to sell someone. They're used to sort of a traditional pitched roof, siding. So, you know, I think our feeling would be that the merits of the apartment plan probably outweigh the stacked townhome plan, but, you know, that's really not for us to decide.
Thank you for that insight.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. One of the reasons, or really the main reason for the gathering this evening was to see whether there was a tremendous amount of sentiment one way or the other. I think that and you know, I need to make clear that it's really a choice between the two projects, not a choice of whether or not there's going to be a project. So there were some concerns that were raised about the stacked townhouse project, and some of them have been mentioned tonight. One of them was the number of bedrooms, the possibility of there being the possibility of more school children, the coverage on the site, and so forth. And so the developer was asked to go back and come up with a different plan, if possible, and the apartment plan is the one that the developer came back with, and that's what's being presented to you. I think from the township's point of view, there's some sentiment that this is the better choice, but part of the purpose of this meeting is to hear whether the residents, having heard both of the projects, had a strong feeling one way or the other. Again, I think that the thought was between the governing body and the planning board subcommittee, or I should say the subcommittee of the governing body and the planning board, that the apartment project may well be the preferred project. So that's really where we are today.
Are there any real projected numbers for the revenue to the borough that's going to be brought in from the apartment as opposed to the for sale thing? Is there a big difference? And I know it's hard to project it, you know, far out, but is there a feeling?
I think that based on the fiscal impact study that was done for the North Lot development, and looking at the existing taxes that are being generated by the property, particularly the South Lot, which is vacant land, I think I'm very confident saying there's a significant net fiscal benefit to the borough with the apartment plan. With the for sale plan, because we haven't done a fiscal impact study for that product, it's harder for me to estimate what the cost of municipal services would be. We can certainly do it. We have a very qualified economist who prepared our fiscal impact study for the North Lot, but we just haven't gotten that one yet.
So clearly, if you're adding, how many is the stacked housing going to be?
Units?
Stacked townhouse, yeah.
It's 52 units.
So there's a fair amount of waste that's going to be generated. So for the local DPW who picks up our garbage, have to go in there, 52 houses worth of stuff, as opposed to a apartment complex where it's going to be a private carter coming in and taking care of it. That time and utilization of man hours is not an impact.
That's a factor. I think that from what we've seen, you know, looking at studies like this on other projects, I mean, the biggest driver of municipal cost tends to be school-age children. And I think there's no question, and we could debate what the numbers would be for apartment units and for sale units, but there's no question it would be significantly higher for sale units just because of the number of 3-bedroom units. But how much more in terms of cost to the borough, we really don't have that data right now.
But I have two questions, last two questions. There are no other options other than these two choices that we have right here.
We think these are the two best options, and these have been the result of many months of planning and exchanging of comments between us and the borough's professionals. I mean, there's always other options, but in terms of where we are today, these are the two best options that have been prepared.
So what option do you want council to make?
We're the most recent plan. So up until 45 days ago, sometime in November was the plan.
3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago. Was it even that long? Up until several weeks ago, we were proceeding with the stacked townhome plan. You know, it's in our settlement agreement with fair share housing in the borough. We were pretty far down the road on the Townhall plan, and we were asked, as a result of a number of concerns that were raised by the planning board, to come up with a different plan, and we came up with the reduced density apartment plan as a result of those concerns. So that's kind of the direction that we've been steered in, and I think council summed up well that the borough, even though I think it feels strongly that the apartment option is the best choice, all things considered, we wanted to solicit input from the community before making a formal decision or recommendation.
No, I'm asking you as a developer, which is your choice you want? Do you say exact home?
I mean, at this point, we want to be approved and move on. We've had a lot of debate on this, and at this point, we'd like to go with the most recent plan, because our feeling is that, all things considered, it is probably the best plan.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
And in the interest of finally, reaching an agreement and having a plan adopted and being able to, have our entitlements in place for the future, and there's some court mandated deadlines that have to be met. That's really the plan that we're pursuing. The apartment plan.
Oh, the apartment.
Just real quick, which proposal costs Russo Development less to build? The townhouses versus the building?
Which one costs less to build?
By you, what's going to be a less projected expense that you're going to be expecting to recoup?
The apartment project, because the floor area is less and the cost per square foot, it's a little bit higher for the townhouse product, but not significantly higher. I mean, it's within 5%, I would say, on a per square foot basis. The apartment project is smaller, so the costs are lower. But the value is also lower, so that's the trade-off. I mean, in terms of economics, if we were very confident that there was going to be demand for the for-sale product, the for-sale product would be more desirable. But we're not going to. It's not just our choice what we get to build here, and given that we're building apartments on the north lot, and we have management that's going to be in the area, that to manage the extra 70 units would not be, would not require significant additional resources. I mean, I think the apartment plan is a good plan too.
I have two questions. First of all, so the town is small enough as it is, and I believe almost half of the town is rental right now, without people correct?
I'm not sure what the ratio of rental product to home ownership is. We could research that.
That was just a comment. My second part is, what does the developer, what is your time frame that you have to start getting out, 10, 20 years?
We're paying we've owned for the development. Once the project is completed, once the CO is issued, you start paying.
I thought you had like 10 or 20 years.
Oh, you're talking on the financial agreement? So once we start generating revenue, we would start paying a percentage of that revenue to the borough. We have to pay land taxes up until the time that the project is completed. Once the project, I think you're asking about the incremental revenue. That would start once the project was built, occupied, and generating revenue.
Years, right?
For the north lot, it's probably, middle of 2020. And for the south lot, it's probably early 2022.
But you're still paying taxes.
Paying taxes now.
And there's going to be apartments on both sides of the road. So
Potentially, yes.
when half the town is renting in, how it is. It's getting more renters. And there's no option, no other option. Okay.
I'm concerned about the development having a negative impact on real estate prices in the surrounding areas. What do you think? What should we do about that?
sorry,
I'm concerned about the development having negative impact on the prices of surrounding, area or real estate. Exactly, what's your opinion?
I would feel very confident saying to you that the investment that we're going to make in these two properties, not just the north lot, which is, I think no one would disagree, is an eyesore, but the south lot, which is a parking lot today, would have to increase the value of surrounding properties.
Well, they want to level out and so they're directly, by us. Just wondering if, it's as a, the prices of the surrounding area would be hopefully positively or negatively impacted. So your opinion, obviously, would think more likely would increase the prices of the surrounding area?
Everybody I'm sure has an opinion on that, but I think it would be very hard to come up with evidence or data to suggest that making the type of investment that we're going to be making with what will hopefully be attractive buildings, well thought out, well planned buildings would reduce home values.
Same too, I do not have the looks of the old primary factory, hopefully, the new development is going to, make the area more desirable.
That's our goal.
So, knowing that the planning board, we were looking at the planning board 52 units, and then you sent it back and said come back with something else. I'll admit, when I saw 73 units, I was concerned that we were going in the wrong directions. But after seeing the plans tonight and seeing that the 73 units have less bedrooms, potentially less children in those bedrooms, I am now in favor of the 73 units. So, I'd like to just thank you, Mayor and Council, for having this meeting. It was very informational. And, I know we're not voting tonight, but I like the 73 units.
Thank you.
I think that when you do a project like this, and you bring in all these people that are somewhat going to be commuters or whatever, for whatever reason they come in, and a lot of them I think are going to be interested in the closeness to the train station. I think that when these people start to mature and they start to develop families, I think they're going to see what a great town Garwood is, and they're going to want to live in Garwood, continue, and they're going to look to buy a house in Garwood. So I think that overall, I think it's a good thing to have this, and I think overall, we might see an increase in our property values because there's going to be more people wanting to stay in the town, and which will in effect raise the prices of the houses that are in town. I really do. I've been thinking a lot about this since this has come up, and it's way better. It's a way better deal than it is any issues. And if you look at it that way and kind of like put it on a scale in a way, it's a way better benefit to the town than it is a detriment to the town. I really feel that.
I appreciate you saying that.
Only if our schools can handle those kids.
Yeah. It's a revolving door with the schools. You have influx and you have people going out, people graduating, and in general, I think that overall you have to be able to handle this. I do.
We're adding 400 dwellings. That's not resolved. That's an increase of 25%.
You're increasing the population, but you're also increasing other things. You're bringing in a tremendous rateable, which the town desperately needs. And I think you're wrong. You're flat out wrong. You're flat out wrong. It's a tremendous rateable.
It's not for us.
It's tremendous rateable. That's all it is. It's tremendous rateable. You're talking about bringing in money to run the town.
I think at this point, Mr. Russo, would you like to finalize your presentation? I don't see many more.
Again, just wanted to thank Mayor Lombardo and the borough for inviting us to come tonight. And I know a number of people attended and stuck around for a couple hours to listen to us, and we appreciate that. And I would encourage you to come to our planning board hearings as we move forward, and we can try to address any other questions you have. Thank you.